On today's episode of Life in Motion, Jamie and I are going to talk about how to boil water, but not in the way that you think.
In fact, it's maybe in a way that we should go ahead and tell you this episode has sensitive subject matter. So we're going to say you're probably safest if you're 18 and up. So maybe don't listen with your kids. It's probably not appropriate for younger ones, but you need to hear this, and we all need to hear this. So
let's get started. A friend of mine is a young adult.
Okay.
And she has been out in the dating world.
Okay.
And it makes you glad that you are married and not living as a single person in this day and age.
Yeah. Yes. So this is interesting because as this friend of ours has been going through this dating experience, I also volunteer with someone who's single, never been married, in her 30s, that would love to be married. And then I have my own young adult child that wants to be married one day. And so I'm hearing from different, this story that I want us to talk about this young adult friend of ours is paramount. But I'm hearing these same types of conversations from all these different angles. So my son did tell me that he would only date to marry. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just date to meet somebody, see if you like them? And he's like, well, of course you would get to know them first. But once I can rule them out as not a potential suitor or whatever, I'm moving on. I'm like, okay.
How does he rule them out? Does he text them or tell them that, this isn't a love match for me?
We have hopefully, I don't know, because you don't really know what your kids are really doing. You just think you do. But we've really tried to train our boys up, and I think they do it quite well, to have anything that could be misunderstood or misconstrued, have it as a face-to-face conversation when at all possible.
Yeah.
Especially if you're breaking up with somebody. Yeah. Make sure they understand what you're doing. Make sure that you're clear. Make sure. Cooper tries to soften the blow with people a lot, so we're just be polite but direct. You can't leave any room for maybe.
Well, maybe he will call me next weekend.
Yeah, and he's had to learn that the hard way. But anyway, this young lady friend of ours, but mine, has gone out with, not anymore, went out on a date with the same guy 2 times. And on the second date, he wanted to look through her DMs on her phone.
Which is
snatched up her phone, and they were talking about she was like, oh, there's this one person that DMs me all the time, and I don't really know them, but they always send me a one-liner. It's so funny that I just keep opening it and reading it because it's so funny. To which he responds, let me take a look at that.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, second date. No.
I don't even think I would 10th date.
I don't.
Not that I would have anything to hide.
I think maybe if you're engaged to be married and you start thinking, you know what, let's create some healthy boundaries in our relationship. I just want you to have all access to everything I do and blah, blah. I know Brian's passwords and everything. But when you're on a second date, nobody should know your password and check your DMs.
Yeah, he was asking for her screen lock.
Yes. He was trying to hold it up to her face so that it would unlock on its own so he could scroll through it. He also mentioned to her how many children he'd like to have. Second date. And first of all, just so if you're listening and you're a young adult, you don't know how many kids you want to have, period.
Yeah.
If you're 40 and you've never been married, you don't know how many kids. You've never had a child. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You have an idea. And I think in premarital counseling, they're like, you want a large family, a small family? How many kids do you want? So that you have a conversation to start with.
Yeah.
But you have one kid and that rocks your world. And you may or may not ever want another one. You don't know what you want. But regardless,
second date.
That's pretty intimidating to go out on a date with someone and they start talking about family, how many kids we're going to have. What are your political beliefs? Are you a feminist?
Well,
do you believe in...
Those are things that you should cover straight away.
Straight away, you're going to have a conversation with somebody about, are you a feminist?
Your political ideologies.
Oh, my goodness. I would never on a second date start having a conversation about my political...
What would you talk about on a second date?
interests? Do you have any common interests? You've said this one time, maybe when you,
Wouldn't you talk about that on a first date?
how much are you covering in one date? You've learned everything there is to know about people's like, first of all, if you're a loud chewer and I don't find out till the second date, I can go ahead and break it off and I don't have to talk to you about who I'm going to vote for. I mean, there's so many smaller things that you're getting to know at first. Like, do I like your personality? Do we mesh together? Did we go to that movie and both enjoy it? Which I guess that doesn't matter because I don't like any of the movies Brian likes. But what do we have in common? It's that, remember when we did the whole season on friendship? And it's like the saying, I don't know whose saying it is, so I think it's yours, where it's just like, oh, me too. Like you're looking for those types of connections. Oh, me too. Anyway, I just feel like if you're young and you're dating, slow your roll, for goodness sakes. Like if you barely know a person, maybe you don't ask them who they're going to vote for. You think you're going to ask them who you're going to vote for on a second date?
Well, when you're only a couple of months away from election,
Okay.
that might make or break a relationship.
That's true.
So let's get that topic out of the way.
Oh, my goodness.
Our young adult friend quickly found out that this guy was
Seems a bit controlling.
very
and over
controlling,
the top. Yeah.
like red flag straight away, which was better to find out.
You want to know that right away. You do.
Instead of getting 6 months in where he feels like even more so has some sort of right to dictate who you talk to and things like that.
It feels like this is a good life lesson for all of us. Not just with dating, but I think you've got to lead in relationship with questions and to be curious a lot more than with demands. I mean, Brian saw this in those meetings he had last week where he was so frustrated, where he's just like, there's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions, but very few people say, what do you think about this? Or my experience is this. Could you tell me more about what the plan for this is? Like, it seems like you could have a relationship with a person and them say, I tend to, once I start dating, I really don't date anybody else because I want to see where this is headed. How do you feel about that?
I read a book recently.
Okay.
That, and maybe this is the way of the world. This girl, she was in her early 30s.
Okay.
And had dated somebody, and she had gone out on 2 dates, and he had been a boyfriend in junior high. So they had known each other in junior high and fooled around a bit in junior high.
Okay.
But they'd gone out on 2 dates, and they were going to go on their third date, and she kind of knew he's going to expect that we're going to have sex on the third date. So, which I guess I'm just inferring from that, if you're a young person dating in today's world, that I don't think this young lady that I know she wouldn't be out having sex with somebody on a third date. But is that how serious? Or is sex on a date just not that serious? It doesn't even matter.
Well, it depends your worldview. It's not that serious for most people. It depends your worldview for sure. But I also was wondering as you were talking, we probably shouldn't be talking about this. Like we don't know anything. Now that I think about it, we know absolutely nothing.
We're just speculating.
We're not helping anyone.
We're pretending we're 22 and know something.
This wasn't the case with our friend because she didn't spend a lot of time getting to know this person through social media first. But it does make sense to me that a lot of relationships start and their primary communication is through social media before you ever meet. So maybe a second date in today's world, like you already have covered a lot of the thing is you haven't been together to know somebody's personality, to feel what does it feel like to be in a conversation with you? Are you going to speak over me or interrupt me? Are you going to chew your food loud? Are you going to, have bad manners? You haven't seen any of that, but you maybe have
an idea
of that person. So maybe when you meet for the first time, you feel so much further down the road that you do want to dive into some of those deeper conversations. But I would say, when are you ever going to find out if they have habits that you can't live with? Like, why do we have to talk about children and political views when we don't even know if...
Can't we just have fun?
Yeah. What if you're rude to the waitress and I'm just like, oh, that's not going to go with, it's not going to fly with me. Brian recently encouraged...
Which that might not come out on the first or second date.
Sure. Then why are we talking about politics already?
I think that'll show somebody your true nature.
It could. That's true. That is true. Brian was telling Cooper recently that he's just like, I don't know why everything has to be quite so serious. Like I don't know why you wouldn't just go out on several dates with several people and get some experience on personalities and relationships and what it's like. And he's just like, I don't know why people your age feel like, you got to be locked down. If you're going to like somebody, it's like, okay, we're locked down. And, but I guess that's our generation. You couldn't track people on social media, so you could go out with a different guy every week if you wanted to. Nobody even knew.
Yeah.
So I don't know. When I talk about Cooper and then I'm talking about this friend of mine, they are both Christians and they both are in the church. And so they both are dating and pursuing people that are like-minded. So they're not dating so much to just, they're not going to be
they're not dating to hook up with people.
Yeah. So they do want something a bit more serious, but where do you just have some fun?
And that's what I'm saying. It would, if I met a lady, if I'm 22 and I meet a girl at an event, and I'm like, you're pretty cool. Let's go out to coffee. And why can't I meet a guy at an event as well and just say, you're pretty cool. Let's go out for coffee.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It doesn't even have to be
a date.
It doesn't even have to be a date. We're just, I don't think that's unreasonable. Okay, but circling back to this book that I read.
Okay.
When does a novel go from being a novel, a story about somebody's life, to porn? And how much is too much? Because you can just pick up a book and think, oh, this is going to be a fun story about a girl who's figuring out her career and her life and whatever. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, well, she sleeps around and there's graphic descriptions of all of the things. And so when you're reading a book, does that become, when is it too much? How do you know? How do you judge that in a book or a movie or a TV show, or is it?
That's a great question. I think I can't give you a hard and fast answer, of course. I think personal convictions are part of it, but even beyond personal convictions, like I feel like there's some rated R movies, like war movies, that I feel like they don't traumatize me like maybe they would someone else that can't handle it and would choose to not watch it. And I think the difference between us could be personal conviction. Mm-hmm. When you start talking about sex and the graphic nature of especially women's literature right now, I think there's probably some wiggle room. Like some people could view it and have a little bit of a difference, but some of it I feel like should be pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Like, and my personal opinion is once the author is telling you more than like their emotional connection and it's obvious that they're having sex, into like details of where someone's being touched and how they're being touched. And I mean, I'm serious, like specifically down to like where you could, if you wanted to, visualize and see something that you shouldn't see with someone outside of the context of marriage. It's porn at that point.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I guess it's not porn because it's not actually a picture, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read some books that you get into the story and there was one that I read, I was like, okay, everybody was reading it. So I'm like, what is this book? Yeah. And I read it and you get into the first few chapters and then it was essentially one chapter of plot, one chapter of sex. Plot, sex, plot, sex. Sure. So I'm just skipping. I read the first page and the last page of that chapter to know, okay, picking up into the plot, because I feel like that book was written.
You know what's interesting? I was, we already talked about Target this year. on this season, so this is not really about Target, but kind of. I was at Target, like scrolling through new release books the other day, and I noticed that there was a teenage girl looking at book covers. And she was with, either her mom was older and she was with her older mom, or she was with her very young grandmother. It's neither here nor there. But the older shopper was just like, I've got to get some more groceries. Like, just meet me over there at the register. So the younger teenager, and if I had to guess, I would guess 13 or 14 years old, was trying to pick out a few books to purchase. And I was looking at some of the sections she was looking at, and I just thought, wow, I wonder, and she looked like a sweet girl. Mm-hmm. But I just wondered, I wonder if her mom has read any of those books, because I accidentally have. You're opening a whole thing that I don't know that you want a 14-year-old reading about. Similar to, I want to be super careful. This goes to like electric pornography, like what you're going to find on your social media and on the internet and everything. But I heard Lisa D'Amour, that psychologist that helped
contributed to Inside
Out too. I heard her say recently that one of the reasons that you shouldn't give teenagers under the age of 14 a smartphone, and certainly not, she says no social media until 16, no smartphone until 14, but certainly no social media before 14, was she was saying the way your brain develops, you don't develop true skepticism until around 13 or 14 years old. So what you're seeing and you're taking in, no matter how many times your parents say that's not real, that's photoshopped, those are that pornography, I'm sorry you saw it, let's talk about those were actors, that's not real, that's not what really happens in relationships. They've already seen it and already believe it. They already think those things are what are normal. And then if not dealt with, then that's what they will attempt to act out in their relationships as they get older. Same thing with reading.
Yeah.
Some of those things that are in some of the books, I mean, my sex life isn't what we're discussing, but I just think like, I don't know anything about this. I mean, some of the stuff that's written, I just go, wow.
It's graphic.
Yeah. And some of it, a little bit dangerous.
Yeah.
Some of it a little frightening.
I have to be careful when I read, and I think all women should be careful. And at the same idea, different venue for men.
Sure.
But I have to be careful when I read too many romance novels, or I don't watch like rom-com movies very often, but if I'm reading too many romance novels, and I don't mean bodice rippers, but just...
I don't even know what you just said.
You don't know that? That's a genre of book.
I hope I don't have any of those.
Those are the paperbacks that are with Fabio and they're in some sensual embrace.
I don't think I've read any of those, but I've not heard that word either. And that's,
okay. Well,
okay.
So, but just a romantic story of a meet cute and two people that fall in love and get married and live happily ever after. Sure. It's like, I have to, if I'm reading too many of those, I can become discontent because, well, he always brings her flowers and he knows just the right thing to say. And and my husband never says the right thing or whatever, especially when you're married and you know somebody very well. And so many things can be taken for granted that I have to realize you're getting disgruntled with your husband for not being a fictional character that somebody has intentionally crafted to draw people into the story and things like that.
That's fascinating. Yeah. After you've been married any period of time, I don't know when it ends, but like when you no longer get butterflies, when I can't think of anything Brian could do right now that would cause me to have an internal butterfly feeling. And I don't mean that ugly. I mean, just like, I have the utmost respect for him, deep soul love for him. Butterflies, I don't get those anymore. But you can find yourself feeling excited for the characters, knowing that those feelings don't happen anymore.
Yeah.
So, which can lead to dissatisfaction, which can lead to betrayal and looking elsewhere for that feeling. And all the things.
You know what shocked me the other day?
What?
Just floored me.
Yeah.
I was doing a virtual appointment with a gynecologist. And
how do you do that?
You get on Zoom.
You just chat with them?
You chat with them.
It just seems
talk
weird
about
it. Just, if you really think about it, where my mind went, it seems weird that you would have a virtual appointment with a gynecologist.
Yeah.
Self-exam.
This is about the whole woman.
Okay.
Not just just the lady parts.
Okay. That's okay.
But we're having a virtual conversation talking about my current stage of life and menopause symptoms and things like that. And she starts talking about, all right, I agree with the science of this, that I am at an age in my life where physiologically, my body has said, you don't need to reproduce anymore. You've done your duty for
well done. Bravo. Moving on.
Mankind. Yep. You've produced 5 children and you've done your duty. No need to continue to reproduce.
Okay.
And my body says, yes, thank you. I'll take a break. So physiologically, desire goes down. My hormones are dropping. Desire goes down.
Yeah.
But, emotionally, connection-wise, for reasons of physical and emotional intimacy, I still should want to be having relations with my husband.
Of course.
But my hormonally, my libido is dropped.
Yeah.
And so this doctor is talking to me about how to give it a jump start.
Okay. Wow. Read those books?
Well, she's like, she said, I'm going to put in your file some links to some different porn sites that you can use to help yourself be mentally prepared and in line with having a physical relationship with your husband. Which, yes, you have to, it takes more mental energy at this point to be in a physical place with your husband. It's like you have to be thinking about it. I've got so many other things on my mind that goes to the back burner, and then all of a sudden you're like, you want a boiling pot of water? Okay.
This is amazing.
This is a good.
Okay.
Anyway. So she's like, you got to set that pot boiling hours in advance. And one way you can do it is you can go to these websites. And she's like, these websites, you can be sure there's no human trafficking involved in them. So they're fine. They're women owned.
She has vetted them out personally.
They're women empowered, women owned and operated. And she said, and some of them are even couples just themselves upload their own videos for you to watch.
What is happening right now?
And that was her prescription for getting that pot of water to boil, which I was just like, okay, I won't be opening those links.
Wow. This leads me to a question, maybe different than delving into this any deeper, but at what point do you, as a healthy Christian married woman, bring your community, your girlfriends, I don't mean anything beyond that, into some of these conversations to check yourself, to support yourself, to encourage yourself? I feel like we often say, like, don't do life alone. You need people, all this. And I believe it, but it feels like sex is a taboo conversation that maybe you wouldn't sit in a circle and talk about. But what should we be doing for our own spiritual health in a situation like this? Because I would rather you tell me that, and I'd rather us sit around and have this conversation with some women 10 years older than us and have them speak into it and offer some advice and things like that hopefully aren't using porn as their end-all be-all. who's sitting with their friends and saying, what do you think about this book? Do you think I'm taking it too far? I noticed one of our school, we have a Christian school attached to our church, and one of our English teachers, right when school was over, she's like, yay, I'm free. I can't wait to spend the summer reading. She's an English teacher. Drop your recommendations. And so I was looking to see if I wanted to look into any of the recommendations, and I was stunned at some of the recommendations, just going like, oh, this is what y'all are reading that you're showing her to read? Because I've tried some of those authors and I know what they write.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of what you're talking about, where it's just like one chapter plot, one chapter sex, one chapter plot, one chapter sex. It feels very similar to if somebody would have said, you know what, take the summer and enjoy your husband. Here's some links to some porn sites. It just doesn't feel a ton different. But where do we open these conversations?
I do think in the Christian community that the messages that we get is, the household that I grew up in, the community that I grew up in, was you wait until marriage to have sex.
Yeah.
I had a birds and the bees talk, but I didn't have a talk about how to have relations being married, or what was to be expected, or what does a healthy relationship look like.
Right.
And that was a long time ago.
Right.
That was 40 years ago.
Yeah. You have not been married 40 years.
I haven't been married 40 years, but I did get a birds and the bees talk.
Oh, okay. I did
get a birds and the bees talk when
okay.
My sister and I, our birthdays are 3 days apart.
Okay.
And so we always had shared birthdays. And I remember one time we went to my mom and we were like, this is what we want to do for our birthday. And she was like, girls, sit down. I need to talk to you.
Happy birthday.
And we were like, okay. And she opens up this book and it's all about, when a man and a woman love each other.
Right.
And,
I love when you get that voice.
And then I don't think I had another conversation about
You didn't have the syphilis talk in high school or junior high or whatever?
I went to a very small private school that didn't talk about sex.
I went to public school, and so sex education was part of your schooling, your academia. And so they show you the pictures on the screen of like his parts, her parts, and back then there was no like same sex anything. So his parts, her parts, how they fit together, how they work together, how this part creates sperm, this one an egg, come together, voila, 9 months later, baby, all that.
Yeah.
But they had this jar that was sitting on the counter in the front with whatever growing in it, like it looked like it should be in the chemistry lab or whatever growing in it. And this, young people, is what syphilis looks like. And it is a sexually transmitted disease. And if you have unprotected sex with more than one partner, you could end up with this on your private parts. So don't do that. Set the jar down, moving on.
Next up.
Open your biology book to page 67.
Yeah.
That was it.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's no, and I don't know about your household, but there's no conversation then when I do get married about this is how to have a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
This is, sex is a whole learning experience in and of itself. And even now, relearning some things.
Yeah.
With my water pot cooling down. My pot of water cooling down.
With my boiling water, there's ice cubes in it. Now I've got to learn new things.
So, yeah, and I think that's the same experience for a lot of people. So if I'm going to make a generalization here, but this is kind of the way things go, and it's changing now. You have had an experience with porn before you get married.
Right.
That's your education.
Right.
And depending on how deep you got into it.
And depending how young you were, it was rewiring your brain to where that is what's normal in your mind. Whether you want to admit it or not, that's what you. Same thing with, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this. You're talking about your boiling water pot. I think it's fine. I remember shortly after Brian and I got married where he said something along the lines of like, being spontaneous, like in the movies, is not as easy as it is in the movies. And we were kind of joking about like a movie scene where they're like having sex in the laundry room on a washing machine or whatever. Like that doesn't happen in real life. And, unless you'd like to have a bruise on your back or, whatever, just that things are much different than I envisioned them being.
Yeah.
Brian just finished a class for his master's at Wheaton on the role of a pastor. And he said after taking this course and really studying this out, that he feels convicted, at least for our children, maybe for all the people at the church, but at least for our children, that premarital counseling be a lot more than it is, and include and encompass some of these conversations. And what have you been exposed to? What are your expectations? What does it really look like? How does it really play out? I feel, since we're talking about this, we probably should drop in the show notes. Quinn, I'll find the link to those books again. But like, if you have younger kids, talking to them about sex for the first time, because the books that we've read with our kids, what I like about them is it's a heart posture. It's like how you were created by God and why he made us this way, so that sex can be really beautiful, and that it doesn't have to be a shame-filled, like just like, like the public school, and here's what syphilis looks like, for goodness sakes, don't sleep around, and goodbye. But why does God say wait until marriage? Why is that by design? What happens if you've not waited? And what can you do to heal yourself? And but going into this, if you have a worldview where sex before marriage is fine, then you're carrying into your marriage a lot of things that your spouse, even if that's their worldview, is not prepared for. Experiences, expectations.
And I think a worldly view of sex in the books that I read, like these people just sleep around without any consequences. Like, oh, that was fun. That was fine. That was no good. I'll never sleep with that guy again, whatever, which is not reality. Right. So back to the question of how do you introduce this as a topic with friends, or to know, like, am I experiencing what I should be experiencing? Or
it feels like maybe my question, maybe changing the question, is what is the balancing act of protecting the marital bedroom? Like, what I do with my husband really is private between us. But opening myself up for community, for someone to say, oh, that's not healthy, or that might not be safe. Or and when I mean safe, I mean, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, in our day and age, are in relationships where porn has affected people so tremendously that porn is being acted out in a marriage relationship.
Well, the gynecologist that I was talking to, she was like, or you can put on your calendar and schedule about 3 to 4 hours of time with your spouse, husband, and you can view this together and, experiment or whatever with what you're watching.
Wow.
So biomedical doctors being encouraged to act out what you're viewing.
I counsel, and I'm sure that this medical doctor fully vetted out those links she gave you. And I'm sure none of this would happen. But I counseled, it's probably been 10 years ago, but I counseled a young girl that had gotten pregnant before she got married, or maybe outside of a relationship entirely. May have been outside of I can't even remember the exact details. But she was young and she was trying to heal. But she talked to me a little bit about what sex had been like. And I actually found it quite refreshing, because most Christians would just like, I'm not going to tell you anything. And then they want you to help them, but you don't even know what they need help with. But she was pretty open. But she was young enough, bless her heart, that she didn't know if it was wrong or right, but there was biting and slapping involved. And she didn't really love it, but
it made him happy.
Yeah.
And
it just makes me think, like, we're going to have to work for now I'm just going to talk as a mom, we're going to have to work for our kids and for the next generation to be safe places to talk about things, even if they feel slightly uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. If our Christian community doesn't come together and be a safe place to really discuss things with our kids, whether they're older kids or younger kids, I hate that. I mean, we've seen marriages fall apart over situations happening at home that just no one told anyone about. Like no one said, is this normal?
Yeah.
Because I do think that there's something in you that...
Yeah. Knowing maybe spouse is using porn, male or female.
Right.
And I mean, it feels like a betrayal to the other spouse. And it is a betrayal.
But Heather,
but they don't say anything about it.
Today, I don't know if people think it feels like, I think our generation does, but I think a younger generation may not even feel like it's a betrayal. Like, this is just what you do.
This is what you do. Yeah.
Like, this is what we watch. This is then how we act it out. It's so normalized.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they feel like it's a betrayal.
True.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But how do we start I don't know the answer, but I would say I'm ready to start the conversation. Mm-hmm. I'm ready to talk to you about your boiling pot of water if I can be of any assistance. I've not been where my boiling pot of water is not boiling, so we might need to pull someone else in. But I would rather have this conversation than 6 months, 8 months, 12 months from now, you say, like, I want out of my marriage.
Yeah. Which is the reality for most people.
I have zero desire anymore. He still has desire. This isn't working. I want out. No, I'd rather talk to you about it every step of the way.
Yeah.
And come alongside you and walk with you and say, like, I don't know the answers to this, but I'll go looking for them with you.
Yeah.
And my gut instinct as a Christian is that the porn is not the answer. Mm-hmm. So we better find some women that have been happily married for 50 years that still look at their husbands and smile with twinkles in their eyes and say, hey, how's that happen?
Yeah.
Or I'm getting ready to get married and we've both already been in sexual relationships with other people. I'd rather us circle up, and some conversations would need to be had female on female and male on male and work through some stuff. I found this fascinating. There's a pretty big celebrity pastor that fell into scandal and all these different things. And he's released a podcast, but one thing he said was the only thing that he thinks could have potentially saved his marriage before all the destruction was being real in premarital counseling when he first knew there was a crack there. Mm-hmm. Just saying, like, this is where I'm coming. Mm-hmm. Me having been date raped, and that wasn't my only sexual experience, but that trauma played out in my marriage for a while. Mm-hmm. Just a certain fast movement or something, I'd be like, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. Like, just, like if Brian would be playfully, like, kiss me real quick or what, I'm like, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you don't heal those wounds, you will carry them into your marriage, into your next relationship. You'll carry them into your marriage, and then you'll get divorced because it didn't work and carry it into the next one.
And even your kids are going to learn a lesson from it. Your kids are aware of more than you think. Sure. They know. I knew my mom and dad did not have sex. They never said that. They never told me that. But I knew. Don't ask me how I knew. I knew.
Yeah.
It was just something that I know. These two people do not have sex. And your kids know something about your sex life. Sure. They're not listening at the door.
Yeah.
But they
no, because they would be horrified.
But there's messages that they're picking up that you're maybe not talking about, mm-hmm. and they know something about what's happening. Whether dad has a porn habit, your kids are not completely in the dark. They might not exactly know, but they know. There's something that when you're living with people and you're with them 8 hours a day or whatever, they know things.
Sure.
They know that there's nothing that's hidden.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's completely secret.
This episode will air in August, which, if you're local and part of Church on the Move, our mid-sized groups will be either about marriage or about relationships. And our sermon series will be about marriage or relationships, because this is something that when you got your call from the doctor, we're like, we got to tell the world that this is what the doctors are saying, only then to realize there's an epidemic of sexual dysfunction in our society, with our kids, with our married couples, with our single people, with everyone. And it's either you or someone you know. It's all of us. And if we want to take back, I guess, sex for the glory of God versus for something that could be harmful or hurt people, then we have to start the conversation. So if you're local, jump into our weekend services, be at one of our locations every single week, get into a mid-sized group and find a healthy and safe community. And I think there's a balance to where you're sharing who you really are and questions that you really have, without betraying your spouse. I mean, there's a way to protect you and your spouse's relationship, but still be a bit more open.
Yeah, for sure.
I think as a parent, one thing that I would caution any of us towards is leaving these conversations up to someone else. I often hear people say like, well, they're going to get their sex education at school. Or in our case, our school currently doesn't have sex education, and parents going like, when are you guys going to teach the kids about, are you kidding me? Like you want to be your primary, you want to be the person that starts talking about this with your kids first, if at all possible, because you can normalize it. One thing we've told our kids is the feelings and the physical feelings that you have in your body, God gave you those and they're a gift. They're for yet an appointed time. You don't really want to act on them yet, but let's talk about them. I mean, if you don't talk about them, then you're going to deal with all kinds of things. On the boys' side, you're going to deal with things like shame because maybe there's a wet dream or something that needs to be handled and they don't know they can come to you. Or for a girl, a complete shutdown, like I don't want to talk to anybody about that. This must be bad or wrong.
Well, and even the way I grew up was you wait until you're married to have sex. And there was talk in youth group about sex and things like that. Staying pure. Don't be physical, blah, blah, blah. Not a talk about this is a gift from God.
Right.
This is, and there's this bridge that no one teaches you how to cross of one day it's bad and the next day it's good. And how do you change your feelings and your mindset to, okay, now I can enjoy this when I've been told.
Well, and you just said something that made me think. You think about it, with zero education, you're told this is bad, I get married, it's good. But I can't speak for a male because I'm not one, but if you've never had sex, it doesn't feel good the first time anyway. So you bring all this baggage of it's bad, and then you get married and it's going to be good, and it's a bit painful. And then you have this war of emotions.
And quick and...
Right.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, now what? How do I do this?
I told my teenagers, which I don't think they've read it yet because they think I'm crazy, but that sex education book series, Christian-based book series that we both have, there's one book that's like more for teenagers or whatever. And I read it and I told Brian, I am 48 years old. And I told Brian, I go, I learned some things in that book that I had no idea about. I've been married 20 plus years. And I'm just like, this would have been helpful to know. Like, even putting words to some of this makes me go, okay, that makes sense now. Without needing to, I can't even remember the exact example right now, and without needing to go into it on the podcast, like we're going to post those books, but it's just like, why wouldn't you? I told Cooper just recently, I was just like, you have to read this before you get married. Because some of it, like understanding the emotion, the spiritual side of things, the physical side of things, all happening at the same time. If you really love someone, you want to know all these things. And it's not like, I feel like if he read it today, he'd be like, well, I'm going to go out and find somebody to have sex with. It's not like that. It's a beautiful illustration of the gift that sex can be in a healthy relationship.
I think from where I grew up, and I think a lot of other people grew up, of just having stay pure. to now everything is good, that has to be an ongoing conversation with our kids of you were created and designed this way. Yeah. This is actually a really wonderful thing, and how to manage those emotions to keep that pot at a simmer.
At a simmer. Just turn down the heat. Don't put ice in it. You don't want to turn it all the way off. Just turn down the heat. Yeah. It's a lot. In case anyone doesn't realize this, it's a lot more a parental responsibility than anyone else's. Yeah. And I do think we need to talk about it in the church. And I do think we need to be talking to adults about their marriages and, with discretion, their sex lives and all the things. But as far as a parenting perspective, this stuff starts at home. Mm-hmm. And if you have an unhealthy sexual relationship with your spouse, that can easily be passed on. And we don't want that for the next generation either.
They've got it hard enough as it is.
They do. We talk pretty openly about just how you're made. And this is, my youngest daughter is always like, did you talk about me on the podcast? So she won't want this. If you are a parent in her class, let's just keep this between us. But, she's just started wearing a bra, but she's at that age where, like, if she takes it off, she, like, hides it real quick so her dad and her brothers don't see. And I was just like, hey, just so you know, newsflash, like, we all know. Yeah. Like, maybe you're uncomfortable, like, somewhere else that someone would know, but you're good. You're safe here. Like, this is part of growing up. We've expected this. We're all on board. We're all good. But just that natural inclination. Hide, retreat, don't discuss.
Well, there's something in us that's like, this is shameful.
Right. And it shouldn't be that way.
My body is a sexual being.
Yeah.
But it's shameful in some way. Yeah. Like I in some ways, I wish you could take some of the worldly attitudes towards sex and bring them to a Christian perspective, because it's like the books I read, these girls have no shame with their body or anything else. And
saying what they want, with saying what they don't want, with all the things. Yeah. So let's roll up our sleeves and do this together.
Yeah.
Let's do this together in Christian community. And if you need somebody to talk to about your relationships, join us at one of our locations this weekend, and somebody will be ready to talk to you. Look for one of us. But somebody would be ready to talk to you. You can come forward for prayer. You can send in an online request. Like, let's do this together. Let's not live in shame, and let's not live in, is this normal? How do I move through this situation? Let's do it. So thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you next month on Life in Motion.